doulas did this year would likely mean being redirected to OPR, because that's what happened with the doulas. The legislature said we want OPR to look into this. And so that's why we started with OPR. But we think that ultimately we'll be looking at both of these pathways. So a little more on the Office of Professional Regulation, and maybe this is a repeat of what I just shared with you. It's a division under the Office of the Secretary of State. You can see their mission. And, we're not by this application saying we have a lot of incompetent or unethical practitioners. What we are saying is that we think that this recognition is going to benefit both the public and early childhood educators. And again, you can see their responsibilities. So let me tell you a little bit about the process. This process is they call it the Sunrise Review process when a profession is requesting to come under their purview. And so the first thing that happens is that individuals or a group requests that a profession be regulated. And they do that through a Sunrise Review application, which we created and submitted to OPR a few months ago. So what is that, and who's the we, right? The application, gosh, I think it's 65 pages long. We spent months writing this. And the we, primarily in terms of the writers, this stands on two pillars. One of the pillars is the unifying framework. And so bringing forward all that's proposed in that document for this national profession at the state level right now. And I wrote those sections, pulling from the unifying framework as a blueprint to answer the many questions that were relevant for that document. And then the other part of the application is making a case that this is a good idea. And the person who wrote those sections was Jen Horowitz from Let's Grow Kids, because she has extensive research and policy experience. And so that's sort of who the writers were and the two pillars. And then this application went out to multiple readers. Some of you on this Zoom session, I know, read the application in some of those rounds. We included the task force, the core team, various Vermont stakeholders, national partners. The folks at NACCE were very helpful to us in reading and making suggestions. So what comes next now in number 2 is OPR's thoughtful, careful reading. They'll do some additional research, including perhaps some fiscal analysis, and they'll be gathering lots of input from the public, from the field, from you all, from legislature, state agencies, other interested parties. They really want to do a broad scan of, is this a good idea? What do people think? What are the various perspectives on this? And then following that, OPR recommends to the legislature that a profession be regulated if they determine it's in the public's best interest and they find there's a potential for some harm to the public's health, safety, and welfare. So they're really, again, looking at the potential for harm and also the benefit to the workforce, to the profession. Then what happens? Well, the legislature agrees with OPR or they disagree. They may take action on the recommendation. They may take a different action from what OPR is recommending, or they may take no action. So those are kind of the ways that it can go. Let me think about this now. Oh, I want to just back up on number 3. There are lots of opportunities for workforce stakeholders and public to have input there. There will be at least 2 large public meetings. We're told they'll be late August or into mid-September, and there'll be at least 10 days to 2 weeks notice so that people know when those are happening. Encourage you to think about whether that's something you'd like to participate in. I became aware on Tuesday that our webpage has been set up by OPR. So they have our application, a lot of supporting documents, and there's an invitation for people to start to make comments and a way to do that. So that's another way to be involved with it. If you want to share your thoughts, your support, your questions about this, doing that through comments. And then they're also having some one-on-one meetings with key stakeholders. We know that they've met with some folks from AOE and the Vermont State Board. I'm sure they're going to be interested in meeting with some of the other agencies and entities. So lots of, really doing a good job of due diligence and getting all that input. There'll be multiple opportunities. So what's the possible timeline? The application went in April. OPR did not start to work with it until June, at some point in June, early July, and that's because they were wrapping up the legislative session. They also have some other reviews that they have in progress. So between July and November, they'll be reviewing the application, doing their own research, gathering input. You can see in August, the website was just set up and stakeholder input is beginning to be invited. August to September, the public meetings. This is wrong. Written comments actually can start now in August, not wait till September. They're hoping to complete their assessment by December. We may have some indication before they actually write the report of which way they're headed and what they're likely to recommend. And then they're hoping to make that recommendation to the legislature in January. They do have some new staff at OPR, who are getting up to speed. And I think they have at least 2 other major reviews and pieces of work under progress. So that's why I underline possible. This is what they're hoping to do and continue to say, yep, we think we can function on this timeline. So just a, this is from the last page of our application. And I just want to read this to you. Why is this recommendation about the early childhood education profession so important? The single most important element of high quality experiences for young children has been shown to be the qualifications of the individual who's working with those children and their families. We believe that elevating early childhood educators as recognized professionals through a system of professional licensure is the key to doing what's most important, doing our best for young children and their families, and through them to creating our best future as a state, because we want to keep our, of course, keep children and families in the center. So I think what I'll do is I want to just summarize a couple other things, and then I'll get out of this. I'll ask you if you want to see any of the slides again, and then I'll get out of the slides, and Sherry, you're going to facilitate some conversation about this. So just to sort of summarize, it's time to take the next step to make this audacious vision a reality. We've heard workforce support for advancing early childhood education as a recognized profession, as described in the unifying framework. We're now seeking recognition of early childhood education as a profession in Vermont as a necessary next step to reaching that audacious vision and honoring the will of the workforce. And I think this is really important. We don't know all the answers about how this might go. Some of what comes next is definitely not going to be in our control. So what is in our control is what we're recommending, right? And it's based on the unifying framework and informed by the workforce. And probably what else is in our control is the input and dialogue that we have with OPR around this and with each other. So I think that's the summary. Speak up. I can't see you all, so just shout out if anybody wants me to do a quick run through of the slides again, or wants to see a particular slide. Could you just say that right now before I close those out? Okay, and hearing nothing.
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, Susan. Could you back up the slide just one? There was just a little bit that I didn't capture at the end of that slide, the one back from, yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to get out of the slides and turn it over to Sherry.
Thank you, Susan. So I am going to start the discussion by calling on some of you to answer either one or both of the questions. So I'm going to review the questions and I'm going to tell you right now the order I'm going in. So you can be thinking of the first three are going to be Alyssa, Lori, and Sonia. So if you could be thinking about, and the questions are, what excites you about this work to achieve recognition for early childhood education as a profession by the state of Vermont? And or what raises questions for yourself or that you think others may be wondering about? And again, we're just gonna, you're just gonna share and then we're gonna move on to the next person. And Susan will be collecting the feedback, and the task force and other members of the Vermont AYC teams that have been working on this use that feedback in thinking about what other communications, how they should adapt other informational sessions in many, many ways. So it's really valuable. So I'm going to ask Alyssa if she would, and you can pass, you could say pass, always an option, but we like to make sure everyone has an opportunity to share. So Alyssa, if you wouldn't mind going first, that would be great.
Happy to go first. There are a few things that I'm jazzed about with this. The thing that excites me the most, I guess, like personally and then professionally. Professionally is the potential for early childhood educators to then hopefully get compensation that we have always deserved, and the way that that can both attract folks to Vermont from outside and then retain folks who are getting degrees within, and continuing to bolster the field from a quality perspective and simply a numbers perspective that we're hitting hard right now. And then personally, I was an infant toddler teacher last. That was the last position I held. And I have never felt less recognized in my work than as an infant toddler teacher. And so personally, just that like recognition of the truly vital work that we're doing in early ed and the vast impact that it has, from maybe like an ego side.
Thanks, Alyssa. I can't remember if I said Sonia or Lori next. I'm going to go with Sonia.
I'm going to say I'm most excited. I put the triple R, retention, respect, and recognition. And then second is to that for me is compensation. And I'm most excited about the respect and recognition piece for my staff, who, you know, have, as Alyssa pointed out, are sort of the unsung heroes. And as Susan said so eloquently in her presentation, you know, they are the backbone, at least of my business. Without qualified and excellent teachers, I don't have a quality program. So I'm super excited about all of that. And then secondarily, the compensation piece is something that is very much on my mind all the time. And we've been working toward, you know, that scale since the idea of it was out. So I know my staff is very excited about all of this. I think the biggest question that it raises for me is what tools might I have to help me explain this to my parents and the community at large moving forward, because we do talk about it all the time in newsletters and various things. You know, when we put out our tuition rates this year, we really spoke a lot about where our money is going, and like a huge chunk of it was going into compensation. So we do explain that we are working toward becoming a recognized profession. So just any more of that. And then also just age-old question is, and I know everybody's working on it, is from the teachers, how do we get there? Like, if we're here, how do we get there? So.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm gonna go to Lori and then Bev and then Linda January.
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about all of it. I can't tell you how happy I was to see it up on the website. It almost just even made it all that more real. I'm most excited about seeing the fruition of all the hard work that's gone into this for years and years and years. I'm very excited for what it means for not only our current early childhood educators, but our future generations of early childhood educators. I'm really excited about all of it. I second, I love your 3 R's as well, Sonia. I know Sharon also said that in the chat. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question, right, which is one that also has been parallel to all this, is how we're going to pay for it. That's my biggest one. But otherwise, I'm just really so happy to be a part of this work and just so excited to see this all coming to be. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori. So we're gonna go to Bev and then Linda January. And I think then Ashley Bissett.
Well, hello. I'm not always part of this group. I join periodically. This subject matter was really of strong interest to me because, we're also working with the doulas as they go through the process simultaneously. So I think we can learn from each other and support each other through the process. I think what most excites me is just that I think it's a step towards implementing the overall vision of having high quality, affordable childcare for all Vermonters. And as somebody whose kids have benefited many, many years ago from having this, I really appreciate the hard work and the importance of compensation to attract enough people to have people doing this work. And so I'm just really excited to see this process moving forward, and I'm in such a thoughtful way and inclusive way.
Thanks, Bev. Linda.
Yeah, my excitement kind of echoes everybody else's. I think it's a long time coming and it's exciting work. My question has always been and still is kind of how this will impact current systems. So how it will impact licensing regulations and staff qualifications there, how it will impact current systems in Northern Lights with career ladder and bonuses and all that stuff. So those are still my lingering questions.
Thanks, Linda. So I have, I think Ashley Bissett is on. Are you here, Ashley? She might be just listening.
I am.
You are. Great. So I'll do Ashley and then Meg and then Luann. Okay, go Ashley.
Yeah, I got to really dive into this during the Leadership Institute this year when I just participated in that. And it was so exciting. It felt so empowering to walk away from learning more about all of this behind the scenes work that's happening. We all know that early childhood educators are undervalued in society. And I thought with COVID, maybe that would change things, but didn't seem to flip it enough. So thrilled the possibility of this moving forward and the recognition happening. Linda, all those things that you just brought up, totally valid. And also I was thinking about how do we pay for it? And, also when I think about the inequity of the profession, the benefits and benefit structure of people working in early childhood, lack thereof, I should say.
Thanks, Ashley. And I do want to recognize Ashley and congratulate Ashley and Meg Baker on their new roles. Ashley is the new UPK coordinator for Addison County, that a role Meg filled for a number of years. So we have some moving around of the puzzle pieces. And Meg, do you want to talk about, before you share, do you want to tell your new role?
Yeah, Yeah, sure. I was actually really excited to see Ashley in this meeting because it's fun to have that overlap. I am the new early childhood professional development director, working with the BEST team at UVM. I'm going to be working on helping to coordinate the state systems around the pyramid model, looking at scale up and sustainability, training and coaching. So all of those pieces, and I'm super excited about that. And I'm delighted that Ashley is in the position that she is too. So nice to hand that off. In terms of the work, the professional work, I would say the thing that excites me the most is the concept of unifying all of the different pieces we have of the early childhood system, thinking about kind of from a social services and an education and a healthcare, all of those pieces being unified into a framework that recognizes everybody as part of the profession. And I think my questions echo what Linda had to say, which is I do wonder how all of the current systems, you know, thinking about educator licensing and Northern Lights and childcare licensing, all of those pieces will adapt to the new systems.
Thanks, Meg. So we are moving to the next lineup is Luann, Rose, Cynthia, and John.
Good morning. I have little to add. People have said many of the thoughts that were on my mind. I just so appreciate the expertise and the guidance of Susan and Jen Horowitz and this team that's led this work so that it is in such perfect shape for the next level of the process. And the two things that jump out are what Ashley talked about is, you know, and this, to me, this is the time that this will work because it's so well organized. The process is, and the process has been so perfectly determined, and we have done so much work in the past few years, so that I do think the time is right. And what Meg just said, the sort of all the regulatory and support systems and how they will fit into this.
Rose, and then Cynthia.
I want to say exactly what Luann just said about just appreciating all the hard work that's gone into all of this up until now. I'm definitely excited about that the maybe increase in pay may entice more people into the field. That's great. We definitely know we need that. As a previous family childcare home myself, I'm really excited about the idea of just how this will impact family home business owners, just on seeing themselves more as a professional, right? And really how that's going to morph and what is that's going to look like in the future for them. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Thanks, Rose. So the next two were hopefully Cynthia is here. I saw she, yep. And then John. And then I think I'm going to open up if you want to share to raise your hand. I think most of the rest of the partners on here are state contractors or state or state employees, and I don't want to put you on the spot and whether or not you feel you want to share or not. So after we go through Cynthia and John and anyone else, some of you are Vermont AYC. I don't want anyone to feel they're excluded, but certainly stick your hand up and we will circle back to anyone that I missed. This has been super helpful for sure and interesting, and definitely want you to raise your hand if you want to share, but I don't want to put people on the spot who feel they need to maintain a neutral position. So I will go with Cynthia.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Hi, everyone. my sentiments on the enthusiasm and excitement mirror what's been said, so I don't need to take up time there. I do have some questions around, and this, I'm thinking of Sonia and Linda and all of the other professionals in the field. Is there a need for some sort of messaging or talking points about, should we become a profession? What does that licensure process look like? And does that process, is it necessary to get a little bit of that information out to the field as they're thinking about responding to, do we want to go through with OPR, and do we want to go through the legislative process, and are they going to be commenting on this? I guess I feel, I don't know what that looks like. Is this one more layer of licensure? I'm guessing yes. And so what does that process looks like? Who could be a part of that? I think you've answered some of those questions, but I'm just curious, does the rest, it would be hard for me to respond to some of the OPR pieces if I don't really know what that process looks like and how I might engage with it, or how I might support others to engage in it. So that's just a question I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia. And we'll go to John. And again, if you are on the call and I didn't call on you, please share. And even if you want to put something in the notes, if you don't want to share verbally, I don't want to exclude anyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. And of course, thanks enormously to you and Susan for the amazing work you've done for so long on this. And just such major kudos for what you've done and the tenacity that it's been involved in all this. You've inspired the field. You've certainly inspired all the institutions of higher education in Vermont, I believe, and you've impacted the way that we teach our early childhood students. So I'm so grateful for that. I'm thinking back, I've only been working in the field in Vermont for 15 years, although I've been in the field a lot longer, in other states. But you have always been ahead of the curve all the way, and I think that's so interesting. I think that it seems at a national level, Vermont has moved to a very much a lead position in terms of all this. It's so complicated. I know that advancing the profession is such a meta concept, right? But it's so essential. And I think that one of the conversations that those of us who've been lucky enough to be part of the Early Childhood Higher Ed Consortium for maybe a dozen years or so now have been really involved in and driven by is the whole ethical issue of all this. How do we recruit people into a field that we love, obviously, and that our students love, when we know, in fact, that they're going to be in a position professionally where they're always going to be challenged financially, and that's a really tough nut to crack. And I think you are really working brilliantly at addressing that. And so I realize listening to the questions attached to this, they're all certainly profoundly relevant, but I have to say that I think at that 30,000-foot view, we have to realize that they are achievable. I mean, look at the difference in the field now from where it was a decade ago. I mean, the concept of Act 76 being implemented 10 years ago would have been laughable, and it's there. And we're seeing this at a national level. I think depending on our presidential election, there's going to be enormous impacts in terms of this field, I mean, potentially Vice President Walz could, he comes to us with an education background, so that's what we need. You've all been magnificent at recruiting every possible stakeholder to the field. And so thank you for that. And I'll stop, but obviously I could go on, as I know everyone who has spoken and everyone else here could go on, because it's so important. It's so vital to all of us. So again, thank you and congratulations, and just keep hitting it out of the park.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else that has something they would like to share? And while you're thinking, I will also have Susan think about if there's anything, because we do have a few minutes, that you want to circle back to that you heard. But I'll pause for a moment to make sure there's no other. All right, Susan, is there anything you want to kind of circle back to or summarize?
Yes, thank you for that invitation. So Sonia brought this up and so did Cynthia, the need for messaging and for tools. And so just a couple of things that we're working on. One is Katie Titterton does a lot of the communications work. Beth has also been very involved in that. Beth Wallace, who's on this call. So we're working on a document that's going to be talking points to share out. Also some follow-up pieces that we'll post on the OPR website as OPR asks us questions or questions are raised by others. One that's Katie's friend, this says she calls it an explainer. So she's working right now on one that tries to clarify some of the confusion around ECE3 and AOE licensure as early childhood educator without endorsement. So explainers, talking points, those things will be available. It's been so good to hear the questions from this group and the other groups, so because it sort of points us in the direction of what are the things that people most want information and want to be able to talk about. What do they need? Sonia, I appreciate your point about needing to have some ways to talk with families and community about this. I think that's important. Definitely will share that with Katie. She's probably thought of it already. We've done this presentation with several different groups, a couple with our most engaged early childhood educators. And so that's one of the ways that we're trying to, through these presentations to get some clarification, to get new information out. So those are a few of the ways. I totally heard how do we pay for it? The unifying framework always assumed increased state level investment and increased federal investment, and we haven't been in a place for that in the years, really not since Build Back Better, right? But I share your hope, John, that there will be a role for the federal government. I think we can't just say let's stop because we don't know if it's going to happen. We keep moving forward and let's do what we can. But it was never intended in the unifying framework that states pick up the whole load for funding this. It's intended to be a public good, right, at both the community level, the state level, and the national level. And then the other couple other things you brought up. One was the bridge. Sonia, you brought that up, and yes, that's right. We have been doing a lot of talking and working and starting to design pieces of that. It's sort of one of those chicken egg things that we can't put those things in place until we get this recognition piece. But we have started to make some recommendations about how different parts of that should look. And if you and I'd love to encourage you to read the whole Sunrise Review application. The section on transitional provisions really speaks to, how do we make sure that current workforce who are highly expert and experienced move into the profession? What are some of the recommendations we're making around that? And then that sort of moves us into that question of how is this going to impact current systems, Northern Lights, CDD licensing, AOE licensing, all these things that, the system's set up in a particular way. We don't want to just layer this on top. So we're not talking about now you need to be licensed by multiple bodies. Nope, there are exemptions and waivers that are built into the proposal. But it's sort of like we can't impact and start to shift those other systems in a big way until this recognition question gets resolved. So again, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. Really appreciate the opportunities we've had to work with Northern Lights, with CCV, and to talk with some of the other parts of the system about what we're working on. That's been invaluable, but we can't sort of move too far forward until we see what's going to happen with this, if that makes sense. So those are the things, Sherry, that I picked up from the comments that and they were great comments. Thank you very much.
Susan, Helen is wondering if We have the link to the OPR application that we could put in the chat. I meant to get that before we signed on today and forgot to grab that link. So if somebody here has that link.
Beth Wallace, you want to do that for us? For some reason, whenever I try to put links in the chat, I'm unsuccessful. It's a, little failing I have. So I know Beth can do it.
But you're good at other things.
I'm good at other things. So when you look at that, you'll see they sort of extrapolated from our application and put an introductory paragraph in, trying to hit a few high points. Then our application is next. Then it says executive summary coming soon. I'm going to work on that because we know there are some folks who won't read the whole application, but it really would be good if people are going to make comments if they were informed, right? Don't just read OPR's paragraph, read the application, or at the very least, read that executive summary that I'm going to hopefully have for them in a week or so. Following that, you can see there's the unifying framework. There are all of our consensus documents. There are links to the National Commission on Excellence in Early Childhood Education. That's what Power to the Profession kind of morphed into, as well as links to our website. There's a response from the State Board of Education who met with OPR. Actually, I don't know if they cleaned that up yet. Right now, that link just takes you back to our application, but ultimately it'll link to a letter that they sent with some thoughts and concerns that they had, and other letters and comments and anything that comes out of a public meeting will all be posted there, as well as all those follow-up pieces that we're developing, like the explainers and so forth. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour, but really for yourselves and anybody you're talking to about this, really encourage them to make sure they have a good solid foundation of information, because it's complicated, right? It's complex. There's a lot involved in this, and we want to make sure people understand what the proposal really is as part of their making comments.
Thank you, Susan. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments for Susan before we head to the next part of our agenda? Well, thank you, Susan, for joining us and giving us the update, and we will continue to keep the ELD committee updated, particularly as we start to understand dates for some of the community feedback meetings that they have indicated they'll be offering.
Yes, thank you all, and thanks for
Thanks,
the
Susan.
encouragement. We appreciate it. Take care.
All right, I think we're gonna, I did want to say that it was great to have John remind us that a decade ago, the investment like the type from Act 76 would have been laughable. And it was just a thank you, John, for reminding us of that. And to think that in Vermont, we have a dedicated funding source for early childhood and childcare in our state is just an amazing accomplishment that it certainly gives me hope that anything is possible, right? Particularly as we talk about the opportunities for preparation and compensation for the early ed workforce. So thanks for that reminder. Forgot how hard that was, and how I think 10 years ago, Luann would remember too, I think we would celebrate if we got $200,000 in the system. So we've come a long way. And now I'll turn it over to Anna.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning, everybody. So the next portion of our agenda is to, bye Beth, is to have kind of the next stage or the next conversation of our policy recommendation process. So just to kind of refresh folks on where we've been in the past couple of months. We asked members of the committee to fill out a Google form about a month and a half ago now, back in late June, to indicate areas that they were interested in ELD potentially elevating policy recommendations around. That survey had about 10 different kind of rough ideas of what the committee might want to support. And those 10 ideas were kind of based on conversations that the leadership team had heard come up in the committee meetings in the past year or so. We had really great participation and engagement in that survey, and then held a meeting again, I think in late June, to discuss what those survey results looked like. And you know, there was support for a number of different things, but more or less we saw people really kind of coalesce around a couple of key themes and ideas. The top two of which were this idea of needing something on the kind of BBF policy slate that speaks to our best practices and values around ensuring that the universal pre-K system continues to provide access for both 3 and 4-year-olds and maintains a mixed delivery model. The second of which is around this priority of offering and investing in a menu of resources for early childhood educators to meet inclusion and social emotional needs in their program in a fundamentally different way than we feel is happening now. So those were kind of the two top priorities. There were some other, I just want to note that like there are so many other different directions that we could have taken this. We definitely heard priorities around workforce, including supporting the stating some type of support for the Sunrise process through OPR, as well as some other priorities. But these two had kind of both the most enthusiasm from the committee that we heard in the last meeting, as well as kind of the most clear strategies or needs articulated, which is why we landed on them. So I circulated beforehand a PDF with the rough draft based on what I heard in our last meeting of some potential recommendations. I'm also going to share a link in the chat of the Google Doc version of that I would welcome people to open if that's what's easiest for them. And just would love to kind of engage in a conversation, getting some reactions from folks. In terms of kind of our timing and next steps, just to inform how you provide feedback, we have about another month and a half before the BBF team will finalize a slate for the policy recommendations to be presented to the State Advisory Council at our late September State Advisory Council meeting. That's the first time the SAC kind of sees the full slate. We gather feedback from them. At that point, ideally have already done a lot of kind of partner engagement and really understood from the VCAP committees what they would like to see, and are really kind of aiming between our September State Advisory Council and our October State Advisory Council are aiming to do more kind of wordsmithing, line edit type of shifts rather than fundamentally changing up the slate. And thank you, Sherry. I promised to put I did put the link. I was worried that I didn't. Okay. So anyway, that is where we are in the process, but I just want to kind of make clear that I welcome any feedback in today's meeting. And if you're someone who like needs to go next week or the week after, read these with a different type of focus and lens, I also welcome feedback asynchronously via email. Or if it's easiest for you to mark up a copy of it, let me know and I can be helpful with that too. So I'm going to stop my rambling there. I had kind of a couple of guiding questions to kind of get some feedback flowing in the agenda, and I'll put those in the chat as well. But also would really just welcome, thank you, Sherry. Really would just welcome any kind of first reactions or comments that people would like to make. And I'm not going to call on everyone because we've already done that once today, so I'm not gonna force people to do that, but I would really like to hear anyone who has thoughts. Maybe I will have to call on people.
Anna, this is Cynthia. I'd be happy to just respond. I really appreciate the work and the thought that's been going into these recommendations so far. I'm curious if you can speak to the second recommendation around the menu of resources. Just thinking that I'm not sure exactly what that means. I mean, I can make a number of assumptions, but I'm curious for a true policy recommendation. Will this be fleshed out a little bit more with a very specific ask about, yes, it's investing, but what are those resources? What do they look like? Where are they going to be housed? You know, what's that direction going to look like potentially to make that recommendation potentially stronger or more attractive in an ask? Because I think it's pretty vague right now.
Thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate that and would love to hear folks' ideas. I think that is getting at a need that we have all talked about to have more than one kind of model or system, recognizing kind of the diversity of needs of programs and children. So that's what that's trying to get at, but I agree that it could be more kind of actionable.
I really like the first one. I agree with Cynthia that the second one is really vague, and I feel like I feel like part B is the elephant always in the room, the can of worms that nobody's ever willing to open, and I feel like that kind of just continues down that path of really not naming it and really kind of thinking that, you know, right, like that part of our system is pretty broken and doesn't function well in all places in the state. And so I think a menu of resources could be helpful, but I think it just touches the issue. It doesn't solve the issue.
You know, I agree. And I think one thing, there may not be a comfort level with like wordsmithing it or suggesting at this time, but I would highly suggest you send to Anna, like some other ideas. And I, you know, as you were speaking, it reminded me that, as I recall, we had a similar recommendation last year that also was vague, and we just eliminated it because I mean, this is actually more specific than that one, but would welcome if it's more comfortable for you to send your thoughts of how to make it a stronger policy recommendation and more specific to Anna.
Thanks, Sherry, for the shout out. All right, Meg and then Matt.
This isn't my role anymore, so but I really like the first one. I wonder about centering equity in the idea and the concept of quality across settings and for all. I know the Agency of Education wants us to use each and every instead of all. But I wonder about centering equity in with quality as well.
Thanks, Meg. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. you may have already mentioned this or spoken to this, but it might be worth repeating it if you haven't. An interesting aspect of this that I think could impact both of the comments or sets of comments so far about both point 1 and point 2. Anna, could you perhaps describe again, who is the audience for this? I mean, to get to Linda's point, in some ways, depending on who the audience is, you don't have to decode this because the code is enough so that the audience knows what you're talking about. But in other cases, the audience may have no idea what you're talking about. And then it's also a word like ensure means some things to some audiences and other ones. Is the audience legislators? Is the audience the administration? Is it all the above? Could you comment just briefly on that? Because that might help with some of the wordsmithing ideas and people's reflections.
Sure. I think the short answer is it's all of above. I think that the more nuanced answer is that the audience for a specific policy recommendation really depends on what we are asking for, and if it is like a programmatic or small p change, or if it's an investment. If it's an investment, then it's clearly the legislature. If it's a programmatic or small p change, we might be talking about state agency partners or other partners. I think the way that this has been worded so far, has been developed so far, we're talking about some investments. So I think that it needs to be more accessible and specific than it currently is.
Well, I mean, if I might, one relatively simple way of simplifying point number 2 is getting rid of a menu of. So investing in resources for early childhood educators. That puts the focus on the money and the investment and who the recipients are, and not the form, shape, scope, and scale of it. And it may be that the point is to elevate and to urge there to be a focus on frankly, the financial investment rather than the details of exactly what that looks like. And that more complex conversation can be had with folks who are working on this behind the scenes, whereas the talking point is just the bigger push for investment, period. That's a way of simplifying it without wordsmithing it that may accomplish the goal, although it evades the underlying question of exactly what needs to be done. But sometimes that's actually the right answer for messaging, is just to leave that aside.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. I would welcome others' kind of comments on that. My fear around that is that if we don't have strong agreement on or consensus on, like, there might be models, for instance, that members of this committee really would rather we not further invest in or scale up. So I fear that, again, to Sherry's point around, we started to go down this road before and struggled. So that's where we might hit some similar roadblocks. But I welcome others' kind of thoughts on that in terms of naming specific resources or models, not naming them, and just urging investments, because we know that this is a big need right now in terms of programs really needing more support to support kids with these behaviors and conditions.
Yeah, I just think we have struggled with impacting opportunity for the investments to offer diverse resources that early childhood educators would like to participate in. And historically, the investments have been in one particular system. And we're hearing, what we heard through ELD and through the several meetings we've had now over 2 years about, what is needed to ensure inclusionary practices and reducing suspension, expulsion, is that their early childhood educators need more resources, first of all, because we have these wait times for some of the programs that are available there, or the programs that are available are not exactly what they need, and they don't have other options like the states that we had come and present back in the early fall that have menus of resources and different ways you can connect based on the children you're serving, the level of preparation of your staff, what is that exact need? And we just really haven't had that, we haven't even had enough resources available for the programs we do have. We certainly have not had a diverse type of programs available for early childhood educators. And it's really been this one size fits all model.
I do think that's where equity can help to center us, right? The concept of everybody getting what they need. And that might not be the same thing for everyone. And so whether that's, tossing the word a variety of supports designed to equitably meet the diverse needs of children, families, and early childhood educators might help to address some of those questions.
Can I ask a logistic question? So what's the, like, I'm just confused. So are these then going to the state advisory council to vote on or to decide that they want to take it up? Is that the
Yep, that'll be the next big step. Yep.
okay? So then I've had this question for a while and I just haven't asked it. So for the first point around pre-K, I feel like that could be a very different stance than what comes out of the pre-K work group that's happening. And so in that sort of if that is the situation, is it, I don't know. I guess I'm just curious, and maybe it's not a question that has an answer. I'm just curious if this is the recommendation coming out of BBF and that the recommendation coming from that work group is vastly different, then what? And yeah, and would that change and influence BBF's stance? And maybe that's just a wondering question and there's no answer, but that's just something I've been thinking about, like how do those two things eventually collide? And if they're opposing, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think
that just might be a thought that I'm having.
No, I think it's a great question, and I'm happy to kind of speak to how I think of that. I think regardless of what comes through in kind of the majority report, because we know there won't be consensus from the Preschool Education Implementation Committee either. Regardless of what comes through from their work, BBF will, when asked to testify or when asked to comment, we will be providing comments that we feel are aligned with the VCAP, the strategic plan, which does name a mixed delivery system. So we plan to do that regardless. I think having it articulated and coming from organically from this committee, and having it really formally endorsed as a state advisory council recommendation for 2025, enables us to be more powerful and vocal about how we are doing so, right? Like, I think about the policy recommendations as really determining how our team is spending our time, particularly over legislative session. So I see it as an important way to really put a stake in the ground and say, that report says something, and other early childhood partners, including BBF, are screaming from the rooftops this other thing. Does that clarify, Linda?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And that totally makes sense and feels good to hear. I think sometimes, right, you get worried, I get worried that sometimes that greater voice of the field could get overshadowed by these reports and these things that are, that are coming out of, because they're legislatively mandated. And I think that's just a worry of the field sometimes, of because it's this legislative mandated report, that's going to be the way. And it's good to hear that point of view. So thank you.
Yeah. Deb, I see your hand. Go for it.
Thanks. So listening to this conversation, I've kind of gone back and forth. Is number 2 meant to say we want a mixed delivery system? Is that code for mixed delivery system? Or is it code for something beyond, like something, maybe a model we don't have today or we don't have much of today? I know in the past, sometimes there's been this idea of a therapeutic childcare model, and I don't know if that's what that's getting at. And I don't know if that's even current appropriate language to use. But so anyway, that's my question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not intending to imply a mix. It's not talking about setting of childcare, pre-K or anything else. It is talking about like additional supports to support inclusion in any setting. So definitely great to hear that there is kind of some confusion there. It could mean, like, it is vague enough that yes, it could also mean therapeutic childcare, I imagine, but it's not specifically referring to that or mixed delivery. Sonia, go for it.
Yep, I love number 1, and thank you for clarifying that, Linda, because I hear you on that. And I do find number 2 vague for sure. I get what it is because we talk about this stuff all the time. I am concerned that that wording will people will be like, we have invested. Like, what does that mean? What is it you want exactly here? Because they have invested. It isn't like they haven't. I think to Sherry's point, and Meg's point, we're talking about the diversity and equity part of it. And so somehow I don't want whoever's going to be looking at this, i.e. the legislature, after it's approved by the committee, state committee, to have an adverse immediate reaction like we do this, like we've been doing this. I guess it doesn't really, for me, I see it and it's the first one's so clear what we're asking and the second one seems super vague. I would also say, I don't know if you need the word menu again. What you're talking about is additional, equitable, diverse. To me, those are the clarifiers there. So I'd agree with the menu piece, probably doesn't need to be there, but yeah, I'm not good at the wording of these things, so I'm just throwing my comments out there, but somehow I'm just worried people can go, we do invest. So.
I like those are great words for us to incorporate. I definitely think we were struggling with trying to put forward the idea that we want there to be a more diverse type of supports, which that will either take a shifting investment or more investment for that to happen. I mean, I think primarily right now, what do we have available to us in the private setting? We have CIS with enormous backlogs. We have EMTSS that is a model, a comprehensive model delivered in one way that can only serve a small amount of programs at any one time. And we have the accommodation grants, right? Like that, those are like, and those also are not funded to the level of which people have needed them in the past. And those are the only things really offered to us in the field. I mean, there's other resources that could be available. There's some pockets of contracts with the state that are offering some other, when we're talking about specific kids and families that we're struggling to serve. I think that's where we're looking for diverse investments and equitable investments, and not assuming that everyone is starting at the same place or that every kid has a particular need that can be solved in this like ladder way.
Go ahead, Bev. No.
Bev?
Listening to that, I want what both of you have said. I wonder if it's important to add the concept in there, because what we're really talking about is support so that all children can participate in early care and education, or in early care and education programs. Maybe that concept could come through a little stronger. Like, why do we want this? Why is this needed? And perhaps noting that it supports to the current mixed delivery system.
Go ahead, Meg.
Meg.
I think you're muted, Meg.
Meg, you're muted.
Sorry. Equitably access and participate, right, is in their programs.
Thank you, Meg. Linda?
Another piece of it for me is that, you know, I kind of read this and it's like resources that us as the teachers need to access and do, right? It becomes something else that we have to do. And I for me, it's not just about like, it's about investing in resources that aren't just for like classroom teachers to access to better their practice and that, but it's also about investing in the manpower resources, right? Like making sure that we have enough SLPs and OTs and PTs to serve birth to 3 and the public school, right? Like it's about that. You know, just the way that people, it just feels like the way that it is now, it's about a program that we have to do and access to make things better for these kids. But it's also that other part of like, sometimes there's not, you know, we in Addison County, we went more than a year without an SLP for children under 3. Like it's that sort of resources too. Does that make sense?
It's also that cross-district stuff for our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Like at some point we have to start addressing some, like, I don't know how but it's the same idea, right? There's stuff that sometimes we aren't going to make a huge difference in without some of the expertise that doesn't exist currently, or we don't have access to properly.
Right, that piece you don't have access to because you're out of district,
Right.
and the family can't access it because they can't get the child there and get the child back, and right, like
yeah.
At the risk of going on and on and on, I want to reiterate what Beverly pointed out, but there's a systemic or a pattern issue here. And as I'm thinking about it, it's a good lesson for us all to remember when you're making a request, it's always good to say why. It's helpful. Right? Why? For what purpose? What's the goal? And so that is included to some extent. I think I haven't read it closely, but perhaps the rationale for point 1, where you say would appear in the policy playbook, right? So there's a whole document challenge, Anna, for your team, that if you put the why, for what reason, what's the benefit in every single one of these points, they perhaps get too long. But if you only put them in the playbook, then they're hidden because not everyone's going to go look at the playbook. So I just want to acknowledge from the writing and editing standpoint, it's always a good reminder to put in the why, but it's hard to be pithy enough for utility's sake. So I just want to acknowledge both the wisdom and the challenge of that.
Thanks, Matt. You hit the nail on the head. That's what we struggle with, particularly with like kind of the breadth these days of like the number of policy recommendations that are coming through the process. It just tends to be too many words. So we do tend to put that kind of like what it means, why it matters, the rationale in that document. I think what we will try to do a better job of this session, and We had a policy manager, a new policy manager join the team yesterday. Will be a part of doing this. I hope you all meet soon. But we will try to do more, kind of have more materials where it's like a one pager or whatever it is on a specific recommendation that has everything you need in one place and isn't a 15-page report. So we'll try to do more of that, but it's really hard to have a really strong recommendation that isn't too long for materials. My tiny violin. Okay, so now that I'm done with my complaining, any other, I'm recognizing we just have a couple minutes left of this segment, and like Sherry said, and like I started with, would really welcome people to reach out. And if you prefer to have a kind of a conversation and not send me feedback in an email or a marked up document, I'm also happy to chat and make meetings with anybody or hop on the phone. But any kind of last comments or ideas in terms of today's conversation? And I will likely ask for people, the whole group's feedback on something, a reworked version, particularly of that second recommendation, in the next couple of weeks via email.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I just want you to know that you all made me realize like how huge this issue is. Because I heard through the conversation, I heard like three different policy recs that we could ask. We talked about, the birth, the birth to 3 shortages and those pieces. And we talked about the implications of, essential early ed services not crossing borders. And so and then we talked about the fact that just in general, lacking enough of the resources that we do have investment in. So there's a lot there. So good luck to Anna and her team in identifying. And maybe it's like, maybe we do get a little bit more of a specific focus in this policy rec, and we need to think about what, because in future years, or maybe we add some bullets to specific, we have a general comment that's better wordsmith than what we have here, but maybe then we give some examples or something like that, because I think really good examples came out during the discussion. So thank you for all of that. And I think, the thing that we've heard throughout the year is that early childhood educators and all of you that attend these meetings really do want to serve children and families. We just need the resources to do it when we have, children with very specific needs and challenges and families that need additional supports. And that's, that really, it is not the fact that people don't want to serve these children or make sure there's access. It's the fact that when we do need some additional help, it's not readily available to us in the way that it's needed. So thanks for all of that. I want to think about if you have any other updates. I want to talk about membership for ELD. We will be sending out a short survey to all the current ELD committee members. This is an open meeting, so everyone is valued and invited to this meeting on a regular basis. And what we try to get a diverse group of ELD committee members that take that extra step of like committing to making it to a high percentage of meetings, so that we have continuity across the year to problem solve, to create policy recommendations, to raise different kinds of concerns and issues throughout the year. So that's really the membership is really a commitment on that you make to making these meetings a priority. So we'll be checking in. It's been about 2 years since we've looked and asked you, like, do you still want to be a member and all of that. So we'll be checking in with the committee members. We also will be asking you if there's, who you think might be missing or anyone that you know of that has expressed interest in participating more formally as a committee member. So that will be coming your way. And if there's anyone who's here as part of the open meeting that has an interest in being a regular committee member, if you want to reach out to me with your interest and sort of the role that you would see that you fill. Otherwise, like I said, open meeting. We have people that attend regularly all the time, you know, but haven't made that additional commitment. So that will be coming out in the next few weeks. Usually, like I said, we sort of check in every couple years to see if that commitment is working or if we want to expand that. So be looking for that. And does anyone else have any updates they want to share with the entire group? Lynn, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I was just going to share an announcement that's coming out from CDD, but I wanted to make sure that people know that the Snelling Center Early Childhood Leadership Institute is now recruiting participants, and the funding is coming from the CDD Child Care and Development Fund. So we particularly are interested in having folks that are working in the profession participate. So spread the word and encourage people to go to the Snelling Center website to find information on signing up for this year's cohort.
Thanks, Lynn. I also, that reminds me, the Vermont AYC team had to pop off for another meeting, but the conference registration is out. They expect to sell out. They've already sold lots of seats. So if you or any of your staff have not signed up yet, you're going to want to do that as soon as possible. Any other updates for the group? All right. I think we're done for today. You get a little bit of time back in your day, and we will get the September agenda out, as well as the notes and the recording for this meeting, and watch. Anna will be sending a revised draft likely before the September meeting of the policy recommendations, and you all had such excellent feedback. Please, I think, Anna, we should send that as a separate so people can look at that and incorporate some of those ideas. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Take care.